Hello and welcome to Chris & Co, the show looking at what affects business in Kent. With me, Chris Price. Joining me in the studio are Joe James, Chief Executive of Kent Invicta Chamber of Commerce, and James Beaton, a lawyer at county law firm Cripps. This week, we're looking at Kent's rural economy and what challenges it might face in a post-Brexit Britain. First, though, we're heading to the House of Commons, where Ashford MP Damien Green stood in for Theresa May at Prime Minister's questions in his capacity as First Secretary of State, effectively Deputy Prime Minister. He had to fend off questions about the possibility of the UK leaving the EU without a deal.
But we're also saying that it is conceivable that we would be offered a kind of punishment deal that would be worse than no deal. It is not our intention. We want to have a deal. We want to have a good deal. Can I also point out to her that it is her leader and her party's position that whatever is on offer, they will accept it. That is a terrible way. That is a terrible way to go into a negotiation.
OK, Joe, Damien Green says there that it's conceivable we could be offered a punishment deal by the EU. So is then it acceptable for Britain to leave the EU without a deal?
No, definitely not. We don't think that is a choice. I think there's a great variety of different views on what businesses want from negotiations. But I think one thing that there's little appetite amongst businesses to actually conclude the negotiations with a no deal. And I think government really needs to look hard at its approach, its aggressive attitude towards these negotiations. That's not how we negotiate in business. We negotiate, we compromise, and I think they can learn a few things from us.
James, do you think that businesses fully understand what the impact of leaving without a deal actually would be?
I'm not even sure I do actually. So no. But to me, that speaks of uncertainty, and I think whatever your preferences are in terms of as a business, in terms of how you want this to turn out, I think uncertainty is the one thing that nobody wants. So to me, it's not an option. People need to know where we're going, and I agree with you, Joe, that it needs to be done in a way that is driving a solution. Aggression doesn't work. We need to find a compromise and a solution that works for as many of us as possible.
Sure. We've actually got one of the reasons why the topic of no deal is relevant to this part of the county. This part of the country is highlighted by recent figures from the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial. They show the South East alone accounts for a third of the UK's private businesses. So does that mean that this area would be more affected more heavily if the UK left the EU without a deal? The fact that we have such a high density of businesses in this part of the world.
If you look at Kent, when they say SMEs, actually the government classification of an SME is actually quite large for us in Kent. 90% of our businesses employ under 10. Most of those employ under 6. We are quite susceptible. We do a lot of trade with Europe, and it's quite interesting. We had an event last night, a Kent Business Leaders Dinner, and we asked the question of them, hands up, who's optimistic about their business for the next 12 months? Every hand went up. Who's optimistic about the Kent economy for the next 12 months? Every hand went up. Then we asked, who's optimistic about the UK economy? And I'll try and be fair and say I think there was one hand that went up. Actually, I don't think there was anyway. So actually in Kent, I think we're quite a resilient county because of our diversity of our business. Small business is actually more resilient. We've only got to look at that, the 2008 recession. We were much more resilient than other parts of the UK.
Sure. James, do you think that there are any things that SMEs in Kent are generally hoping are going to be achieved from the negotiations? What do you think their priorities are that they want the government to look at?
I think you've got the free movement of people, free trade, and clarity around how those things work. I agree with Joe. The local economy, if you like, is strong, but at the same time, we are the most proximate county to Europe, and an awful lot of what happens in Europe either comes to us or comes through us. So how these things work, I think, is really important for many of the businesses that are based in the county.
Are small businesses, or SMEs rather, do they have a different set of priorities to perhaps larger business areas where there are generally larger employers? Does Kent tend to take a different angle when it looks at these kind of things to other parts of the country?
Yeah, I think generally Kent does. I think when you have, and it's not just Kent, there are other counties that have small businesses, and in some way it can be a weakness if you're made up with that, but in other ways it can be a great strength when you're not reliant on one issue. But if I look at Kent and the businesses that I deal with, particularly looking at our rural sector and tourism. Well, not just those, manufacturing as well. Probably the key thing that, going across all those sectors, where their biggest concern is about movement of people. It is key to the Brexit deal, is that they have clarity on what's happening to the existing workforce they've got, and especially with such low unemployment figures, they need to know where that future workforce is coming from.
Absolutely, and unemployment is a very key thing for a sector that we're going to look at now, which is the rural sector. Last week, the great and good of the rural sector in the Garden of England came together for the Kent County Show. Over the weekend, more than 80,000 people came to see the best of what Kent's agricultural sector has to offer. Our reporter Cameron Tucker spent the weekend at the show.
The Kent County Show is the flagship event of the South East agricultural calendar. For 88 years, the finest wares and livestock have been brought here, and this year, as always, there's something for all lovers of farms, food and flowers. An action-packed 3 days saw more than 300 activities and 400 stalls exhibit the garden and pasture of England in all its glory. The cattle jostled for top billing under the watchful eyes of the judging panel. The goat rings also saw rosettes handed out to the cream of the horned crop. A short stroll to the Hadlow College marquees and sheep shearing demonstrations ran throughout the weekend. Observing the young shearers was Julie Lukehurst, who's keen to get across the importance of this ancient skill.
People just think, oh, shearing, they're taking the coat off, but they don't actually know what happens to the wool afterwards. And I think if you can tell young people, they think, oh, actually, now I know where wool comes from, what it's used for. It's a bit like, the dairy industry, isn't it? Like, where does your pint of milk come from? And a lot of children think that it comes from a supermarket.
From shearing to shoeing, visitors could watch the heated blacksmith competitions at the purpose-built forge. Like Julie, farrier Phil Dunmore stresses the need to educate showgoers.
It is a mystery to some people. I mean, the first question is, does it hurt? Well, they're standing pretty well. I don't think it does hurt.
And with uncertain times ahead for rural affairs, giving the Kent farming community due weight is essential, according to the county's Agricultural Society chairman.
It is key that the public realise the whole that is agriculture, from the food to the environment and the landscape, and that they actually look at that as something that they want to retain, and it's a value to them.
It wasn't just livestock and the future of farming that took centre stage at Detling. On offer was Canine Aqua and a display by the Coke and Bloodhounds. This slubbery beast is one of the Bloodhound gang that have come today. They've been in films and adverts and quite a lot more photogenic than I am. Aren't you, buddy?
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, it's fantastic to see the Kent County Show still showing off the best of Kent's agricultural sector after 90 odd years now. What are your experiences of the show?
Great food and drink. Is that the thing to say? Yeah, great food and drink. I think it's great that it's been going that long and it's still attracting families. The families and people of all ages are going. And actually, we are the Garden of England, and it's somewhere we can actually show off our tradition and our heritage. And there's lots of old skills that are being lost along the way. And what great way to get the young people interested in those than having the great day out at the county show.
But that is one of the big issues for a lot of people in the sector who are at the show. They talk every year almost about why they need more and more young people, particularly to find their, you know, the older trades of interest, or to be just attracted but to the rural sector in general. I wonder what they need to do to try and make the sector more appealing to people who might be considering what their options are for a career in the future. What do you think?
Well, I don't think it's just the rural sector, because it's also, you know, the same thing could apply to construction, could be applied to manufacturing, and it's the image of these sectors. You know, they're thought of, you know, maybe very manual, you know, very old-fashioned sectors. But actually, if you know, I went to AC Gotham recently. You know, they do all the apples and the pears, and you know, the technology that they have there is absolutely amazing. And you know, I think there's so much of this comes all the way back down to careers advice and guidance. Because if we're not making our young people aware of what the opportunities are in the sector, they're not going to take the opportunity. So, you know, I think it goes right back to, you know, back to when they're in school and ensuring that they know what opportunities are there.
James, do you think that this is a sector that is in a good place at the moment, briefly?
Well, for our county, yeah, I do. And you know, the county show is the single point in the year to celebrate what is, you know, in terms of the rural economy, what is so important to Kent. I think it is in good health. I think that it's not without its challenges, particularly around aspects of Brexit. But as a whole, I think it's in good health, and the people we're working with are doing well.
Brilliant. Yeah, James, thanks very much. We're going to continue our discussion after the break. Coming up in the programme, a Kent farm feeding our appetite for berries, and we reveal our number of the week. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Chris & Co, the show looking at what affects business in Kent. With me in the studio today are Joe James, Chief Executive of Kent Invicta Chamber of Commerce, and James Beaton, a lawyer at county law firm Cripps. Before the break, we were discussing the challenges ahead for rural businesses in Kent. One company facing some welcome problems is WB Chambers & Son, which is fighting to meet demand for its juicy produce. Louisa Britton went to visit them at Oakdean Farm in Maidstone.
Over the last decade, people are eating a lot more berries, with the likes of strawberry and raspberry consumption overtaking apples and bananas. And this year, the warm and sunny weather in Kent has seen the fruit crops boom. Oakdean Farm here just outside of Maidstone specialises in the production of soft fruit, so that's things like raspberries, cherries and blackberries. Now, the last few months have been particularly good in terms of weather for fruit production here in Kent, and I've come here to find out what sort of effect that's had on the produce here at this farm. The Chambers family farm has been based here for centuries, and this year they'll be collecting more than 2,000 tonnes of raspberries, a sixth of the UK's production. They're one of the largest suppliers of supermarkets in the country, with more than 1,000 people working on the farm.
It's been a very early season, more so than I've ever known. The winter was mild, and it started off quite early. We had some frosts, but they weren't too damaging in this part of Kent, and we've got very early crops. You probably actually economically make more money on 2/3 of a crop, because the price is a market and the price is reflected by the demand. On a year like this, it is perfect. The consumer wins. I mean, we have to do a lot of work, and the fruit quality is very good, and the prices are generally cheaper. So it's good for the consumer, more hard work for us.
But the increase in crops is also due to a growing demand from the public, as healthy eating trends have become more and more popular.
I'd say the last 15 to 20 years, there's been a steady growth in demand on soft fruits. Strawberries, even though there's good volumes around, I think there's over 60,000 tonnes of strawberries sold in the UK, it still keeps creeping up every year. And the other berries, the minor berries like raspberries, are growing at, I think last year was over 20%. People want to have improved their diet, and they want to live a longer, healthier life, and berries have been shown in countless studies to provide what the body needs.
With both crop sizes and demand increasing, it seems it's likely to be a very busy year at many fruit farms across the county. Louisa Britton, KMTV.
Okay, so fruit farms across Kent are clearly doing very, very well. Are you hearing stories about this sort of revival for the sort of food and drink sector in the county? I mean, things are just absolutely flying for us over here, aren't they, at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at our fruit producers, every one of them at the moment is a great success. And look at wines. Look at the wines and the revival in not just British wine but in Kentish wine, and that's something we're very much blessed with. So I think it's great for the county, but obviously they have the biggest concern because they're very heavy on labour, and obviously a lot of them in both those sectors rely on European workers. And obviously Brexit deal coming up, there's a lot of uncertainty, and I know in a lot of the farms at the moment a lot of the people have already gone home, so they need clarity as soon as possible to keep that success going.
James, a lot of your clients are talking at the moment about their concerns about this access to labour once we leave the European Union. Do they have any hopes and aspirations for the kind of arrangement that is going to be made when it comes to keeping foreign labour for picking fruit and that kind of thing?
I think what they'd like to see is a recognition that actually access to the European labour market for the type of worker that they need should in some way be carved out of any arrangement or that there is, simply because there are not the workers in this country who are either willing or able to do the picking that needs to be done. Whether that is possible or not, we will see. But it's absolutely true that it's one of the primary issues for all of them at the moment. And I think it was interesting what you said, Joe, that a number of these pickers have actually already gone home. So the impact of of what is about to happen or will happen over the next couple of years is already being felt. So this is a right now issue rather than a 18 months or 2 years issue.
And there's no possibility that farmers in Kent could actually replace these EU migrant workers who come over to pick fruit with a workforce from the county. That's just something that's unrealistic, is it?
Well, it must be possible in some way, but I think it's unlikely. What we are seeing is clients who are now looking outside of the European Union to see whether there are options there. Ukraine in particular, and Ukraine's been in the media quite a lot as a potential source of labour. But so it's that sort of creative thinking, I think, that we're starting to see.
The rural sector is also rather worried at the minute about the potential changes to EU subsidies. At the moment, it's very well known that the Common Agricultural Policy perhaps in some areas props up some farmers, perhaps in some areas it's just a very, very helpful way of keeping their business going. What are members, clients saying to you about what they think life will be like outside the European Union? Do you think that they feel that they can exist in a non-subsidised environment?
From what I'm hearing, no. I think what they're doing is they're looking to the government now and want clarity as soon as they can on what the government will actually be doing to replace those funds that they've currently had. So I think skills is the big thing, funding and legislation are the key things, I think, for that sector, leading up into the negotiations and after.
Do you think realistically that a solution will be found that keeps the European countries happy and the United Kingdom when it comes to the subsidies arrangement?
I'm sure that's possible, yes, Chris. Whether it's likely, I don't know.
Yeah, sure. What do you think then about the future of legislation around this sector? I mean, unpicking all of the different regulations around the EU is going to take a heck of a lot of time, and really no one really knows how we can start to tackle this. going forward. I mean, what from a lawyer's perspective, James, this just must, perhaps this is heaven for you. I don't know. Looking at all
Trust me, it's not. It might be to some, but I remain confused, really, about how possible it is and how likely it is really to happen. A lot of, particularly around food, a lot of the regulation that exists allows us to trade within the European Union as it stands now. And it will undoubtedly, if we want to continue to trade with the European Union, we will need to continue to comply with these regulations. So I think to expect them to change dramatically as a consequence of Brexit is, in my personal view, quite unlikely. And I think, as you say, knowing where to start is something that, I mean, there are a number of areas where I think people will look, but in terms of the food and the rural economy, I don't really see a lot of changes happening straight away.
Okay, well, thanks both for your input on that. Just before we go, let's have a look at one of the new features on Chris & Co, which is our number of the week. And here we go. And here it is. The number of the week is 200. That was the fall in the number of people claiming unemployment benefits in Kent last month. There were 18,910 claimants of job seekers allowance or universal credits, a fall of 200 on the figures for May. First of all, guys, were you expecting unemployment to shift down across the country? It's also down. We're still at record low levels since the early 1970s. Another thing brought up by Damien Green in Parliament.
Yes, so I was expecting it to come up because it has been continually coming down. We have got very low unemployment rates, very low, which is good. It's very good. But on the other side, for a business, actually, it is quite concerning because we're looking for growth. So therefore, we're looking for new workforce, skilled workforce, and actually, where are they coming from?
Absolutely. And unemployment is, surely at these low levels, it is just something that we have always aspire to. Surely this is something that we want to continue. I mean, can it keep going down? At what point are we in a healthy economy?
Personally, I think where it is about right. Where we are now, but actually, in some way, it does give some hope because if there's such low employment, it's a very good opportunity for the young people that are coming through, and it's a great opportunity for businesses to get together and actually really help, those young people by giving apprenticeships.
One of the only slight downers on these wage figures, on these unemployment figures, is that real wages aren't still catching up, and presumably that causes, still some concerns for the government when they're looking at these figures, James.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. But logic would say that the fewer people there are around to do the jobs that need to be done will result in some form of wage inflation and increase. And I think that's what the market will start to see if this trend continues.
Still feeling optimistic then, the pair of you?
Yes. Oh, definitely. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Brilliant. Guys, thank you very much for your contributions today. That's it for the latest edition of Chris & Co, our show looking at the issues affecting business in Kent. Thanks to both our guests joining us today, Joe James from Kent Invicta Chamber of Commerce and James Beaton from the law firm Cripps. You can keep up to date with all the county's latest business news at kentbusiness.co.uk, and you can follow us on Twitter at kentbusiness.co.uk. Thanks for watching. Have a very good evening. Bye-bye.